Hey guys, and welcome to the Human Computer Interaction Chapter 6. So we will be discussing about the UI Development Toolkit. And by the way, this chapter involves programming language knowledge, but even if you don't have knowledge about programming, I'll still, try my best to explain to you and discuss to you on what will gonna happen after you have this kind of design, then give it to the developer. Hoy, or ginaunsa na siya program para makaproduce mo isa ka result. Okay, so there are different UI development toolkits that is used in order for you to produce an output. Okay, so let's start with our first slide. Okay, the learning objectives. Okay, so for this chapter, we will be discussing about the Java Out UI Toolkit, the Android UI Execution Framework and Toolkit, the iOS UI Kit Framework and Toolkit. So all about toolkits or different kits. Okay, wait. Let's add some animations. Okay. So let's discuss first the user interface toolkit or the UI toolkit. So what is a UI toolkit? Okay, so the UI toolkit is a library. Again, a library of pre-composed UI objects, which would include event handlers and a predefined set of events that are defined and composed from the lower level UI software layer or the UI execution framework. Okay, so the UI toolkit abstracts the system's details of handling events, and as such, programming for interactive software becomes easier and more convenient. So the use of a toolkit is also promotes the creation of an interface with a consistent look, feel, and mechanism. So it's actually a library, no? Ang gatawagon lang nimo siyang library in order for you to produce, buttons, text, images, inputs, etc. And there is what we call widgets in a user interface toolkit. So it is a UI object, often takes the form of a manipulable graphical object. Okay, a typical widget set includes menus. We also have buttons. We also have text boxes, and then images, inputs, etc., and a lot more, and everything that you have on your design. Okay, so that is a toolkit. Again, it is a library of pre-composed UI objects. So which will gonna help programmers or you to build a really great application. Okay. So first, let's discuss the Java Out UI Toolkit. So Java is a programming language, and there are a lot of programming languages that we can use when we want to develop Android applications, iOS applications, web applications, and yeah, and a lot more. But for this chapter, we will only be dealing with the Java programming language. So we're going to discuss the Java Out UI Toolkit. Okay, again, Java is an object-oriented language. So, medyo maduguan na siya if we're going to discuss about Java. We're just going to get the concept on how are we going to develop using Java programming language. Okay, so it offers a library of object classes called out. Out means abstract window toolkit. Okay, which are classes useful for creating two-dimensional or 2D UI in graphical objects. So in Java, we use this out, the abstract window toolkit. Okay, and out has this what we call components. Okay, sorry, let me drink first. Sinsya na guys. So the most bare and abstract UI class from which other variant UI objects derive. Okay, descendants or the subclasses from the component includes window, button, canvas, and label. So the window class has further subclasses such as frame and dialog, and each class has basic methods. So for example, a window has a methods of resizing, adding sub-elements, setting its layout, moving to a new location, or showing or hiding, or etc. Okay, so again, the Java Out Toolkit has its components. Okay, and then the components has different subclasses that includes the window, button, canvas, label, and a window has a subclasses which are the frame and the dialog. Okay, so that is the out. Okay, the Java Out UI Toolkit. So this is the hierarchy of UI objects, and this is how actually this is how you create it. Okay, from the object there is a component, and the component has different it includes button, label, checkbox, container, list, choice. It also have text component, scroll bar, and canvas. Okay, so just imagine that the components has this different components. Okay, and in a container it includes window, scroll pane, and panel. Okay, and in a window it has frame, dialog, and in dialog it has file dialog. Okay, in a panel it has up lists. In the text component it has text field and text area. Okay, so imagine you have this design now. Okay, in page, you have this image, you have this inputs, you have this buttons, but ask yourself, how are you going to make it functional? Okay, so in Java there is a toolkit called out. Okay, and mo na siya yung mga components. Okay, so in a menu component it has of course menu bar, menu item, checkbox, menu item, menu, and pop-up menu. So here's the example code for that one. So in here, what happened is you create a frame. No, you create a frame, a window with a menu bar. So you have this variable is equal to you instantiate with a new frame. Okay, and um, this is a sample code. This is the Java sample code. Okay, so it would be very hard if you don't have this programming knowledge language, but this is how it is being made. Okay, so just get the idea. So this one is the hierarchy of the UI objects, and creating a window and setting some of its properties through calling its class specific methods, or to the right. Okay, what happened in here is this, that show method will gonna display it, and that resize method will resize. Okay, and this actually really involves mga ano na mga day, mga methods programming knowledge kid. Okay. Okay, so the Java Out UI toolkits, there is also what we call the out events. The out events, this is a part of UI execution framework for Java that handles a large subset of interaction events. Okay, so in an out event, there is also an event objects. This is the interaction events are sent to Java programs which were are captured, abstracted, and stored. So the out events are descendants of the event objects that cover most of the useful UI events, such as the mouse clicks, keyboard input, and etc. or anything resizing, something like those things. The out framework will map the out event to the corresponding out UI object. Okay? So again, kinsa out events. These are part of the UI execution frameworks that handles subset of interaction. The event objects are the events that are sent to Java programs, no, which are captured again, abstracted, and stored. Okay. Okay. So there are two ways of the UI object to handle the events. The first is overriding the predefined callback methods of the interactive applet for applet object for the events reacting to various mouse events and redrawing the given interactive applet. So note that each event handler must return a Boolean value, true or false, indicating whether the event should be made available to other event handlers. If, however, the event cannot be processed for some reason, the event handler may return false to signal that other components should process it. Okay, so we have these different event types and then the callback function. So when your system has this different functions wherein mouse down, mouse up, mouse enter, mouse exit, mouse drag, get focus, lost focus, K down, K up, action, the callback function will going to be like this. Okay, so again, in programming, guys, you just need to import the library, import the out Java toolkit, and after importing that library, you can now then use these different functions. Okay, these are the different callback functions. You're just going to call this. Tawagon. A library kasi is it's already a piece of program wherein naa na siya yung mga different functions said nga tawagon na lang nimo. Kaya tawagon na lang nimo in order for you to show an output. Okay? Kung unsa imong gusto ipa-show. Okay? So as for the mouse down, the method mouse down, and then just put in the event, and then these are the different parameters. Okay? And then different values kung if mouse down, pila ba siya ka-scroll, inana. Um, yeah. Okay, so this is an example, an interactive applet with callbacks for mouse events. When the mouse click is entered, the applet draws an object at the click position. So when the mouse moves, the whole applet is repented and a new cursor is drawn at the newly moved position. So this is how it gonna happens. As you can see, in our first and second line, we import the Java out. Asterisk means uh, all all libraries from the out, and we also import the Java applet. So imagine that when you have this design, example naka-design na ka and you give it to a developer, then the developer will going to create it using using Java programming language. So this is how it looks like. Okay, just get the idea on ginaunsa nila. Because this is another course naman po if you wanted to study programming. Okay, so in here, just example, um, the developer created a public class my applet, extends the applet, now the applet library, he extends the class. So in here again, when the mouse click is entered, the applet draws an object at the click position. Okay, so when the mouse moves, the whole applet is repainted and a new cursor is drawn to a newly moved position. Okay, so this is the code. Yan. So don't worry because we will not be discussing everything about programming. Just get the idea on how the developers create it. Okay, next. So this one. So there are two ways for the UI object. Again, that is the first one. Now we are in the second one. So as a second mechanism for implementing reactive behaviors to various events, the individual out UI object is to be registered. Kailangan ma-register siya with an event listener that waits for and responds to the corresponding event. Na ay tigpaminaw. Okay? Listeners. So the listeners, the event handlers in Java out. Again, kinsa ang handle sa mga event? Si listener. As its name suggests, it is a background process that listens. Siya ang gapaminaw for the associated events for a given UI object and responds to them. Okay? So it is an abstraction of the event processing loop we have previously discussed in this section assigned to a UI component for each of various input events. Okay, I think it's in the chapter 4 or chapter 5. Thus, the listeners also must be registered for various events that can be taken up by the given UI object. So, as a single UI object may be composed of several basic components and potentially receive many different types of events. So, listeners for each of them will have to be coded and registered. So, again, before siya ma-process, it should be registered to an event listener. Okay? So the in Java Out UI Toolkit, the event listener has these different listeners. We have the action listener, adjustment listener. We also have component listeners, container listener, focus listener, input method listener, item listener, key listener, mouse listener, mouse motion listener, text listener, window listener. So naay gapaminaw sa iya no? So again, unsay purpose ni listener gani? It will and wait for and responds to the corresponding event nga imong buhaton. Okay? So again, balik ta diri for the component listener, it has component adapter, container listener, it has container adapter. And inani gini siya guys, dili ni siya typo error but when coding there are different standards. This is actually a camel case nga ano nga pagka-right. So ina gina siya. Okay, in a focus listener it has focus adapter. In key listener it has key adapter, mouse etc, and so on and so forth. So these are the different listeners, event listener interface hierarchy in Java out. Okay, so again, on say purpose listener, it will wait and respond to the corresponding event nga imong gibuhat. Okay? Next is we have the event component hierarchy in Java. Okay, so an event has uh, has action event, adjustment event, component event, input method event, item event, text event, and in the component event, it has container, focus, input, paint, window, and in an input, it has key, of course, unsa imong gipang input, and then the mouse event, or is it, yeah, how the mouse responds. So in action event, if the event is, if the event class is action event, the description and the samples would be, button press and double click on an item or selection of a menu item. So just going to call on this function. And then for the adjustment event, scroll bar movement. The component is either hiding or revealing a component, component movement and resizing. Focus event is for the component getting or losing a focus. Think, okay. The key event is for the keyboard input. The item event is for the checkbox selection or deselection or menu item selection. The mouse event, mouse button, mouse moving, mouse dragging, mouse focus. Text event is for the text entry, and the window event is for window opening and closing, window activation or deactivation, or window iconification or de-iconification. Okay, so again, these are the different events in event component in Java out in a Java library, Java toolkit rather. Okay, so these were the different methods and iyang gamit kung ginaon sa programmer or ginaon sa imong developer pag-develop. Okay, imong program. So next, these are the events corresponding listener interfaces and derived methods in Java out. Okay, so let us say, for example, the event class action event. So in an action event, there is, again, na may gapaminaw in every event, diba? There is an action listener. Okay? And for example, the method niya ana is si action performed. Okay? In an adjustment event, there is an adjustment listener. And the sample method is adjustment value change, or so on and so forth. So these are the um, different derived methods wherein tawagon lang na nimo siya kung it depends on the program. No, it depends on the feature or unsa ang gusto nimo mahitabo sa imong system o sa imong application. Okay, so let us say for example, you want the user, if gagamit siya mouse clicked, no, so unsa gamiton nga method ni developer, kanira siya si mouse clicked. Okay, the event is mouse event, the description is mouse listener, then these are the different derived methods. Okay, so ayun na kayo, imagine na lang kung giunsa. But if you have this will to develop, no, using this kind of language, then inganaon siya. Okay, so there is an event, there is a listener, and there are derived methods where you can use in order for you to anong mabuhat na siya nga feature, or mabuhat na siya nga steps on your system. Okay, so next, so again, it's not only Java, guys, and there are already a lot of programming languages nga imong magamit in order for you to develop an Android application or iOS application, or web applications. So here's the top 10 as of 2020. No, we have Android, Java, we also have Kotlin, Swift, React Native, we have Dart, C++, C or C++, Flutter, and Ionic. So these are the different languages. And if you want to study, so just go to their different documentations about Android, Java, Kotlin, Swift, React Native, Dart, C++, C, Flutter, Ionic. There are a lot of tutorials. Yeah, there are a lot of tutorials in the internet. So if you want to learn more, just go to their websites. Okay, just go to Google and search them. That's it. So that is for the Java. Again, what toolkit that we are going to use when we want to develop a system using Java? They have this out UI toolkit. Okay. Oops. Wait. Let me charge kay nagano na siya. Reklamo na siya. Okay, continue na charge na. So let's move forward with the Android UI execution framework and toolkits. Or if you want to design an Android application, and what kind of different toolkits nga pwede nimo gamiton. Okay? So the user programming environment and execution model for Android, even though at a low level, the operating system is derived from Linux, is based on Java. Okay, it is still based on Java. As such, the Android event processing model and programming toolkit structure are mostly the same as those of Java, or more specifically, the Java out. We know that we know the Java out toolkit, right? So except that the Android UI toolkit, in addition to the programmatic method, includes a declarative one for specifying the UI and defining its behaviors. So pare-pareha ra gid sila sa Android. Okay? I know the Java out toolkit. Okay, so here's the example. I think blurry na siya sa inyo, pero just check the PDF para mas ano siya, mas tinaw. Okay? So, events in Android can take a variety of different forms, but they are usually generated in response to bare and raw external actions, such as, touch and button input. Multiple or composite higher level events may also be internally recognized and generated, such as touch gestures, flick, swipe, or virtual keyboard inputs. So, in here, as you can see, same regapon sila hierarchy. No, this is one of the sample. Ano diri, nag-create siya og method, nag-create siya class na may UI object. Again, nagya po the import, and then exits applet, and then you defined a variable b1, b2 for the button 1, button 2. So there's also an action listener, and then this one is the derived method. Okay. So again, in an object, there is always an event listener, and then we get tigpaminaw sa iya, and then um, next is the derived methods from that listener. Okay. So yan, that is the example. And similar to the case of Java out, there are two major ways to define the reactive major to these events. So the first is to override the default callback methods of the view interactive class. I know of the view interactive class objects for various typical input events. So this is an example. It's the overriding the default view methods such as the on touch event and on key down, on touch event, and then the on key down for defining interactive behaviors for the UI object. For the UI object my view to be touch event and virtual keyboard inputs in an Android UI toolkit. So what happens actually in here is the developer created a class called myView, and then yeah, call on the different methods, the on touch event, the on key event, and then supply all the necessary parameters and kung sa pa ng different other na mga um other na mga iyang i-process. Okay? Okay. Next. Guys, again, maduguan siya. It's really hard for me to actually explain it to you because it involves programming knowledge. But if naamoy programming knowledge, no, dali ra ninyo masabtan. But I hope that you get the idea kung ginaon sa developer again, kung ginaon sa niya pag-create. Okay? So the second method is to associate an event listener with a view object. The Android view class. So in here, the Android View class, from which all UI components are derived, contains a range of event listener interfaces, so each of which contains an abstract declaration for callback method. So in order to respond to an event of particular type, a view must register the appropriate event listener and implement the corresponding callback. So here's the example. Okay? Ayan. So again, um, the Android in here, the Android View class, from which all UI components are derived, contains the range of event listener interfaces. Okay, and each of which contains an abstract declaration of callback method. So pang tawagon na ni mga methods, and then kung sa imong gusto mahitabo sa imong application. Actually, predefined naman ang mga methods. Okay, so for example, ni, if a button is to respond to a mouse click event equivalent to the user touching and releasing the button view as though clicking in a physical button, it must both register to the view. Okay, so you can see in here. Um, it must be registered the view that on-click listener event listener via a call to the target views, set that on-click listener method, and implement the corresponding on-click callback method. So in the event that a event is detected on the screen at the location of the button view, the Android framework will call the on-click method of that view when the event is removed from the event queue. So it is, of course, within the implementation of the on-click callback method that any of the tasks should be performed or other methods called in response to the button click. Okay? So again, kani siya nag-create siya class, okay, instantiate, and then kanina din yung gitawag, no, nga method, nga variable, mauna din niyang gitawag sa katong mga different listener. Okay? So, I hope nga wala pa nagdugo na inyong ilong dara. Um, yeah. So what happens in here is that the my activity ng class creates a view object. Okay? Creates a view object called my view. Okay? And redefines my touch listener class by extending the view that on touch listener. Okay? In here. So then an instance of my touch listener here, um my touch listener is created and registered to listener to my view. Ayan. Nagduguin yung ilong. Inana na gina siya. Okay? So just get the idea kung ginaon sa lang niya. Wait. May gani kayo na pause before ko nagkuhan, nagatching. Okay, so in this example, my activity creates my view class, implementing the view. Okay, and then on touch listener and instantiates in my view object view w. Okay, the listener is registered by calling the set on touch listener on itself. Okay, so again it involves programming knowledge, and then we will not be discussing about the logic and about the backbone and any programming ano kay it's a different course na po. So just get the idea. So in here, what happens in here is the my activity implements the view touch on listener. So again, these are the different callback methods, nga gikan na tong library, and then just call it kung unsa imong gusto buhaton. Okay? And this includes an overrides on touch handler. This one is the example. Okay, so it implements the view that on touch listener, it override, and then it creates the on touch handler. Yeah, so that's it. That's one of the example. Okay, so again, as mentioned, same ra siya sa Java out, right? But then in an Android, it has a declarative specification for UI of the UI. So this one is the example for the new sheets application from the chapter 4. So the declarative specification is saved in an XML file with element constructs for UI components such as image, buttons, actually kini siya image, buttons, and other etc. We have different inputs. So note that the file names, the elements for lateral referral in the program, and the one of the attributes of the UI object is the UI handler name or the encircle load file. Okay, so yan. It's actually really hard for me to explain everything to you guys, but kailangan gyud siya programming knowledge para mas masabtan ninyo. But if you have a programming knowledge, then dali ra kaya ninyo masabtan nga unsa na si XML file, no? Okay, so that is how the Android application works. So I hope na nakuha ninyo bisang gamay lang idea. Now let's gonna move on with the iOS UI Kit framework and toolkit. So in an iOS, there is a different three types of discrete events. We have multi-touch, motion, remote control, and then remote control. Wait, nanapod ko yung mali. It should be in here. Okay, so remote control or discrete events from external devices such as remote control headphones. Okay, so the iOS generates low-level events when users touch or views of an application, and the application sends these discrete events as UI event objects. So again, sa yung pinakauna, When the user touch views one application, it generates low-level events. So the application sends these discrete events as UI event object, as defined by the UIKit framework to the view. Okay, so there is a specific UI different components on an iOS. So on which the touches occurred. The view analyzes the touch event and responds to them. So the touch events can be combined uh, to represent higher level gestures such as flicks and swipes. The given application uses the UI kit classes for gesture recognition and responding touch recognized events. Okay, so that's it. So this one is the example of the graphical specification of the UI for the usage application. Itong sample na to sa chapter 4. So the graphically displayed UI is consistent with the corresponding declarative representation saved in the file main.xml. So actually this is the developer side. So we'll not really explain pag tanan-tanan dala kay maabtan tag pila ka months, no. Okay, so this is the example of a programmatic specification of the UI for the usage application. So it shows the code for the implementation of the UI handlers. Again, it's the load file and this defined in a declarative specification. When you actually have this programming language, mas easier na mo siya masabtan. Okay, so this one, for continuous streams of sensor data such as those of the accelerometers or gyroscopes, a separate core motion framework is used. Nevertheless, the mechanism is still similar in the sense that sensor data or abstract event or recognized event is conveyed from iOS to the application and then to the particular view according to the hierarchical structure of the application UI. Okay, so this is an example of an iOS toolkit, iOS UI kit, a UI object hierarchy. Okay, so there is a window, sample, window, there's a view, there's another view, and there's a button of that view. Okay, yan, man yung sample. So next. So when users touch the screens of a device, iOS recognizes the set of touches and packages them in a UI event and places it in the active application event queue. Okay? And after that, if the system interprets the shaking of the device as a motion event, an object representing that event is also placed in the application's event queue. Okay, so the singleton UI application object managing the application takes an event from the top of the queue and then dispatches it for handling. Typically, it sends the event to the application's key window, the window currently in focus for user events, and the window object representing that window sends the event to an initial object for handling. Okay, so that is how it can happen. If wala ka mo siya nasabtan, then go back to in here. Basa na. So again, when the user sets the screen of a device, iOS recognizes the set of touches. So you imagine, okay, imagine nun mo and packages in a package into a UI event, and after that, it places in an active application event queue. Okay, and then look at this muna yung hierarchy kung saan ka kahit saya. Yan. So simple as that. So di na kay nato i-struggle pag yun og discuss na sila. Okay? Continue. Oops. Continue ta. That object is different for touch events and motion events. So for touch events, the window object uses heat testing. Okay, sa touch event, si window object gayus og heat testing and the responder chain to find the view to receive the touch event. So in heat testing, a window calls heat tests with events on the topmost view of the view hierarchy. So this methods proceeds by recursively calling point inside with event on each view in the view hierarchy that returns a yes. So proceeding down the hierarchy until it finds the subview within those bounds the touch took place. So the view becomes the hit test view. So if the hit test view cannot handle the event travels up to the responder chain until the system finds a view that can handle it. Okay, so for motion and remote control events, the window object sends its shaking motion or remote control event to the first responder for handling. Although the hit test view and the first responder are often the same view object, they do not have to be the same. So the UI application object and each UI window object dispatch events in the send event methods. So again guys, ang naadirigid is a different methods when we call on those different events. Okay? When naa kay gusto nga kani ang mahitabo sa imong system. So again, um, it involves programming knowledge para mas dali nimo siya masabtan. But this is the hierarchy. This is sample hierarchy. This is the event responder object class hierarchy. So in an object, there is a responder, and from that responder, there are applications, UI view, UI view controller, and then for the UI view, there are, when you want to display level, image view, UI control, window, scroll view, and in a UI control, there is button, slider, UI switch, UI text field. So actually, if you have this programming knowledge and programming skills, it would be easier for you to understand this. And mas dali ra sa imo nga inana ang iyang ang inana ang gakahitabo sa iya. Okay? Next. Okay, continue to diri. Okay, dispatch events in the send event method. After that, a responder object. So, nasa ginatawag na responder. A responder object is an object that can respond to the events and handle them. So, siya mag-respond, siya mo handle. UI responder is the base class of all responder objects, also known simply as responders. So, it defines the programmatic interface not only for the event handling, but for common responder behavior. So UI application, UI view, and all UIKit classes that descend from UI view, including UI window, inherit directly or indirectly from UI responder. Okay, and thus their instances are responder objects. The first responder is the responder object in an application, usually a UI view object that is designated to be the first recipient of events other than touch events. So a UI window object sends the first responder these events in messages, giving it to the first shot at handling them. Okay, so inana lang gakahitabo sila, no, communicate ra na sila. There's an object, there's a responder, and the responder will, siya mag-respond if there are something na need i-process. Okay? Yun. Okay. So this is the last one, I think. Okay, so in this diagram, if the first responder, di ba siya man to maglantaw, or the hit test view does not handle an event, UIKit may pass the event to the next responder in the responder chain to see if it can handle it. Okay? So the responder chain is a linked series of responder objects along with an event is passed. It allows responder objects to transfer responsibility for handling an event to other higher level objects. Okay? So an event proceeds up the responder chain as the application looks. Oh, sorry guys. Application looks for an object capable of handling the event. And because the head test view is also a responder object, an application may also take advantage of the responder chain when handling such events. So the responder chain consists of a series of next responders, each returned by the next responder method in the sequence. So the response behavior itself is implemented by the responder objects or the UI components such as the window, button, slider. Okay, so this one is example. So this is the event processing flow, event processing flow of the event-driven object behavior structure. Okay, so the user input is captured and then abstracted and recognized by the UI toolkit or the UIKit framework and queued into the proper application view objects or responders, which implement the particular response behaviors using the UI responder methods. Okay? So, ayan. Yan yung nangyayari sa kanya. Okay. So, again, in this chapter, it's really, really hard if you don't have programming language, but I hope that you get the point. You get some basic idea on how the developers create an application kung i-code na siya using the different programming languages. So kasagara, the logic are the same. No, there is an event handler, there is an event listeners, and there are different callback methods, callback functions that the developers use. No, there are different libraries na predefined na gamito na lang ang yung mga callback functions for you to be able to produce an output or process kung siyang gusto i-process. Okay? So in this chapter, we reviewed three examples of a UI toolkits. We have Java 3D or the Java, actually the Java out, and then the Android and iOS. So there are certainly many other UI toolkits. Again, daghan kayo. However, most of them are similar in their structures and basic underlying mechanism. Okay? Lahi-lahi ra siya o butang na to mga names sa mga methods, no? Logic, but the same lang na sila kung giunsa ang ilang way. Okay, so as you have seen, some UI toolkits include visual prototyping tools and declarative specification syntax, which make it even more convenient for developers to implement user interfaces. So in general, the use of UI toolkits promotes standardization, familiarity, ease of use, fast implementation, and consistency of a given platform. So it's very important that you use a toolkit, no, when creating a program, because it would be very hard for you to display a button, inputs, image, dialogues if there is no toolkits. Okay, so more na siya guys ang kailangan in order for you to develop a really great system. Okay, so it's very important na in HCI you should know that, no? Kung giunsa kailangan makasiguro kag design user interface, UX UI designs, and then wala ka kabalo kung ginaunsa din na siya dayon after pag imo na siyang i-moved to development, di ba? Okay, so I hope that you have learned something. If there are things that not clear to you and there are things that is unclear to you, feel free to use Google, search it, and there are a lot of results ngayon mong mabasa dito, and there are also a lot of um, other YouTube tutorials that you can see, that you can view para mas ma-enhance pa ang imong learning when it comes to the different toolkits and developing an application. So I hope you guys have learned something. Keep fighting and have a great day. Have an awesome day. Okay?